Alright, so I'm very angry right now. Don't I look angry? I'm angry. Alright, so today I'm going to be sharing an interesting story. It's been a while I shared a story like this. I saw a man and his wife. They are in their 30s, very young couple, got married a few years ago. The woman had issues with fibroids, and after some workup, she went ahead and did what we call a myomectomy. That's surgery to remove fibroids. She had the surgery somewhere here in the southwest, in a private facility. But a year after, she was still unwell. She had lost a lot of weight. She was hardly eating. She was always vomiting. She couldn't move her bowels. She was chronically ill. And she had hopped from one hospital to the other, both private and public hospitals. She had moved from her own state and had even come down to Lagos State for second opinions. She had gone to some of the big government hospitals. Nobody knew what was wrong with her. She had done variety of imaging investigations, CT scan, MRI, colonoscopy, all results inconclusive. But basically the conclusions from those investigations is that she had probably an ovarian cancer. Alright, so when she saw me, the husband, you could see that they were very unhappy with what was happening to her. They didn't know what the problem was, and they were looking for help from wherever they could get help. So I carefully examined all their investigations. I had quite a lengthy discussion with them, letting them know my thoughts. And I said, okay, after doing some other investigations, we said we were going to go ahead and operate on her. We were not sure what we were going to find in there, so I told them we would operate, and what we were going to do will be determined by what we find right in that surgery. So no certainties, no assurances per se, but I felt at least let's get to the root of what the problem is. Of course, sometimes when you know what the problem is, then you can find if there's going to be a solution to it. We don't claim to have all the answers, but sometimes we need to be brave and try and find what the problem is. Right? So I gave them time. That's my style. Let you know what the problem is, give you time to think about it, and then you let me know if you are going to take the option I've given you, or if you have a different option, let me know. Doctor, I don't like the option you gave me. This is the option I want. Or you say, doctor, I don't want you to manage me anymore. I would like to be managed elsewhere. I mean, just be plain about it. No need to be angry. I don't have to manage everybody. Of course, I can't manage everybody. So just after a few days, I think she got worse, and she was brought to the emergency room because she was vomiting. And so the husband sent me a message and said, my wife has been admitted to the emergency department, and we've decided to go ahead with the surgery next week. I said, well, that's fine. So she came on admission. We went ahead with surgery. Now, at surgery, what did we find? We found something very interesting, but very sad at the same time. So things can be interesting to medical people. Because I remember when we were operating, one of my younger colleagues who were operating with said that this is a very interesting case. It's interesting to you, but big deal for the patient. Now, guess what we found? I'll give you a few moments to guess. I'm sure you can't guess. Again, you can't guess. Um, so we found out that from the myomectomy she had, a sponge had been forgotten. So usually when we operate, we use sponges. That's a layman's language to just say what we use. We call them different names, but they are usually quite big. Okay, so about the length of you know a big sanitary pad, something that they use after delivery, something as big as that, sometimes much bigger. Right, but in this case, it was something as big as that, but not the very very small sponges. But what had happened was that that sponge must have been forgotten beside the uterus, because we usually use those things to soak up blood and secretion. So it must have been forgotten, and then because the thing had been there for over a year, the thing had migrated. So there's a way the body, those things elicit reactions in the body, and that thing had migrated through the intestinal wall and had gone into the intestine itself, lodged into the intestine and blocked it. So that was what was causing our intestine to be blocked, what we call intestinal obstruction. There was no tumor. There was no cancer or anything. That's what was blocking the intestine. So after a lot of struggles, you could imagine the difficulty in doing that kind of case, having to pull out the intestine. A lot of parts of the intestine were torn, of course. We had to cut out that segment of the intestine. And then we brought together held the intestine and joined it together. Surgery went quite well. I mean, we closed everything up, prepared everything, cleaned out everything, and she went back to the ward. Of course, initially I didn't tell them what we found at surgery. I felt, okay, let's give her a few days to recover, and then I'll let the husband know and all that. Of course, I knew usually the recovery is usually a bit turbulent, because there's a lot of bacteria that would have seeded that area. So by the time you bring them out, the spillage of those bacteria into the bloodstream, and patients have what we call sepsis. So of course we were already expecting things like that. So we had already upped our antibiotics and all that. So the whole thing was quite under control. She recovered. By around the 5th day or so, she was able to start something orally. But after a few days of oral intake, she started vomiting again. Okay, similar to what she was experiencing before surgery. So maybe by the end of the first week to the 10th day, she was vomiting, several episodes of vomiting, And at the end of the week, of course, I called the husband to explain what we had found at surgery. Told him point blank, I wasn't putting blame on anybody who had operated before, but this was where the problem came from. I don't know who operated on you before, but this was the problem. And of course, there was video evidence, so there was nothing to hide. But to my surprise, when I told the husband, he wasn't angry. I expected him to be angry with the doctor who had done the previous surgery, more or less like, why would they have done that kind of thing? He wasn't angry. He showed some degree of unbelief, more or less like, are you really sure of what you're saying? Of course, he didn't tell me that, but that was the body language I got. So, but he really didn't say much. He just said, okay, no problem. A few days after, he sent me a message saying that he wanted me to speak to the doctor who had done the previous surgery. I said, well, yes, I will speak to the doctor, but I wasn't ready to speak to the doctor just yet. Came again and said some other people wanted to speak to me. I mean, why don't you relay the information I've given to you? Why don't you relay the information to whoever you want to relay the information to? It's a number of challenges that we usually face with patients and their relations. They want the doctor to keep talking to everybody, more or less as if the doctor has no work. You have one patient, and it's just that one patient you start speaking to different people about. That's wrong. A few days after, he started making trouble on the ward, saying he does not know what we did for his wife. The same thing that she had before surgery is the same thing she's having after surgery, and that there was one of those days when I guess I wasn't around. I was not in the hospital, and then he started saying things like, nothing must happen to my wife. If anything happens to my wife, you see what will happen. And of course, my younger doctors told me that these were the things he said, and I'm like, sir, I only tried to save the life of your wife. If you want to shout, go and shout at the doctors who took care of her before. Don't come and shout here. I knew the nature of what we had done. I knew that sometimes patients can develop some of those kinds of problems, and I knew what to do to manage those kinds of problems. So all they needed was patience. I don't know what the underlying issues were. I found out that shortly before, he had called on the parents of the girl, more or less like, come and take care of your daughter. Maybe he was already looking at other options. When you see you've been married for a few years, no child, your wife has had this surgery, has had this other surgery. You can be discouraged, but don't pass those vibes to your healthcare providers, those that are trying to save the life of your wife. So fortunately, the lady and her parents were very responsible and understanding. So I had to explain all this. Everything I had explained to the husband, I explained to the patients and the relations about what we found at surgery, what we thought was happening at that point, and what we were going to do to manage it. All we needed to do was to rest our bowel for a while, and then to start moving normally again, because our wound was fine, everything was fine. No signs of overwhelming infections, apart from the fact that she was severely malnourished, with swollen feet and all that. And they were understanding. They said, doctor, yes, we understand. Please don't mind that man. Just take care of our daughter. So that was encouraging. Coincidentally, just before, a few days before, he came to make noise on the ward about saying that his wife must leave the hospital fine, nothing must happen to his wife. He had actually shared my number without my consent with the doctor who did the initial surgery. That's another thing we say. Why would you share my number with someone else without my permission? So the person had tried calling me multiple times. Of course, I didn't pick up, and then he sent me a message. He introduced himself as the gynecologist who operated on her and all that. So yeah, that was nice. So I decided to speak with him. So we had a discussion. I told him this was findings. Of course, he was very surprised too, because seems to be a specialist in his own field. I said, well, sometimes mistakes happen. But this was what happened, and he took it well. There was no issues. Asked me if I thought she was going to make good recovery. I said, yes, I think she's going to make good recovery. All right, so after that, I didn't see the husband again. Suddenly, everything I'm saying now happened in less than 2 weeks of being on admission. She had had her surgery. Initially, by the 5th day, she had started eating. By around the 7th day, she started vomiting. That went on for about another 3 to 4 days. So by the end of the 2nd week, also the girl or the lady Sometimes some patients are a bit difficult to manage in terms of we want to do something for them, but they are not able to cooperate fully. Some patients are just like that, and you just have to find ways of managing them, especially when you have to put this tube down their throat. She was not going to accept it, so once you put the tube, she will remove it. Of course, so that will lead sometimes to delayed recovery, but that was fine. Suddenly, guess what? I started getting messages. So someone will say, I'm the sister of the patient. Please, I would like to have a medical report stating everything that happened. Someone else will send me a message. I'm the brother of I'm the brother of the woman you operated on. Please, I want to have a medical report. The husband too, the same messages, and I'm like, Nigerians, why are you so funny? You want to have a medical, when I've told you everything that happens. If you want to move your wife to a different hospital, just let me know. We'll write a referral, you move to a different hospital. But fortunately, and by the grace of God, of course, I answered them. I said that was during the weekend. I say, oh, by Monday the reports will be ready, so you can come and pick the reports. By Sunday evening, the lady started moving about normally again. I mean, everything became, she was now able to eat. All that obstruction that I was talking about, which of course I expected to just be temporary, everything resolved, and she was as good as anything. I mean, perfectly fine, moving around, smiling. By the time I got to her bedside on Monday, she was all smiles. I checked my phone and I saw that the gynecologist who operated before was asking, oh, how is she? I did a short video and sent it to the gynecologist, where she said, oh, I'm fine now, everything is fine now. Within the next 24 hours, she was discharged, completely fine, wound completely healed, everything fine. At discharge, we told the husband, please go pick the medical report you asked for. He said no, he did not need it anymore. Why do you think he didn't need the medical report anymore? Because he wanted us to be he wanted the bad news. That's the only thing. It is the bad news he wanted in the medical report. Not since everything now turned out fine, he didn't want the medical report anymore. We always blame healthcare providers. Patients have got to do better. Forgetting that doctor, that nurse is a human being, that they have emotions. You think you can just say anything and then turn around and say yes, it's your duty to take care of the patient? No. You need to protect the emotions of your healthcare providers, because even when things are not going on well with the patient, it also worries that doctor. They are not like, oh, the patient is not fine, what's my business? Every night, every day, we think about the patient. We think about what we could do to make the patient better. We struggle to save the life of the patient, but this is how the husband and the family paid us back. I'm sure. So I also found out that when there were all those complications, the doctors who operated on her earlier were saying she should come over. And then after surgery, and they found out that there was some delayed recovery, they were saying, why don't you bring her back to, I don't want to mention the state. No. Of course, I don't think they don't primarily live around Lagos, so maybe after surgery they would have come back to their state. Since then, no thank you, no come back, nothing. It just disappeared. So when you see, sometimes when you go and see a doctor and you go to and he shouts at you, you wonder why he's shouting. It's because some people have not treated him well. You need to have a large heart to be able to overlook a lot of nonsense that patients do. And then all you're going to say is that those doctors, they are not even patient, they don't listen. But when the doctor is patient, I never shouted at them. When that doctor is patient, sometimes the Nigerian maybe it's not only, I think it's Nigerians. Don't let me say it. You take it for granted, and then you just treat that doctor anyhow. Let it be a point of learning. We need to do better, right? So basically, I'm not angry. I'm not angry. Do I look angry? I'm on vacation. I can't be angry on vacation. So catch you some other time with another interesting story. Bye.